Hi everybody, Jake Hannafy here. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Turns out I'm not very comfortable sitting in front of a camera. I usually like to write things and post blogs, but unfortunately that idea in today's world seems to be about 100 years out of date. So I thought I'd try video blogging, if you will. I just want to talk about what's on my mind. Well, what's on my heart. And it relates to the 2016 political season. Also, please note I have a couple of cats who I love but like to scrap about this time of night, so I may be shouting at them occasionally. I've not lost my mind. What is on my mind is, well, I'll just put it in perspective for you, at least as it is for me. I grew up poor to a couple of parents who really worked their asses off physically. My father was a heavy equipment operator. Excuse me. I used to watch him writhe. He would lay on the living room floor and just writhe in pain from his back. He did a lot of hard work. And my mom, she has always been a housekeeper as long as I can remember. I mean, she always had to work hard jobs. Back in the 80s, she worked at a local factory, sweltering temperatures. A woman doing what just a few years before would have probably been considered man's work. And she's always had trouble with her neck and her back. This July, she'll be 57. And all of my life, I'm 34. Well, I'll be 34 on Sunday. She suffered in a lot of pain. I just did her taxes. It's April 16th, 2016. And I just did her taxes for her because that's just something I have a gift with, doing paperwork. Anyway, this poor woman, she worked most of the year, most of last year, as a housekeeper for a, what do they call it, a convalescent home or nursing home, I guess is what you would call it. She was a housekeeper, and it's not easy work, especially for a woman of her age with the disability she's living with and working with. And she decided she'd had enough. She went to work for a local hotel as a housekeeper. I probably shouldn't be saying this like publicly, but people have got to know. My mom works her ass off and suffers for it, and she made poverty level income last year. And I just filed her taxes. She owes the federal government $27. Excuse me a minute. Bug. Like I said, cats. She owes the federal government $27, and she got a refund from the state of Delaware for $17. So that puts her $10 in the hole. I guess what frustrates me about this is I know men and women who are able-bodied and aren't working simply by virtue of having sex with someone and breeding children. Case in point, my partner was working. He came here from California, and the cost of living, as you know, is quite high. And he took a job at a local grocery store. Excuse me just a minute again. Bug. He took a job at a local grocery store, and, excuse me just a minute. Life with cats. Anyway, he took a job at a local grocery store, and it was shit money. The only thing they offered was part-time, and the way they set up their scheduling, it was all over the place. So if somebody did want to get a second job, it was almost impossible. Anyway, bless his heart, he walked, I don't even know how much distance there was between our apartment and his place of work, but he walked in all kinds of weather, sweltering heat, put him in the hospital because he was dehydrated, because he was just walking so far and working so hard and then having to make the slog back. And for the last 8 years, I've been employed at a local auto repair facility that is, I guess, moderately successful. Solvent, I can tell you that. I'm its bookkeeper. And, we don't make a lot of money. We get by. We've struggled to do so, but we get by. We lived in this apartment building that I had lived in before, back in, I think, '07. I was working 2 and 3 jobs to keep a 2-bedroom apartment. It was a nice apartment, and I liked it, but unfortunately, as it turns out, I have fibromyalgia, and I just had to quit working 2 and 3 jobs. I get by with one now. But anyway, back then, I had a nice 2-bedroom apartment. It spanned the whole front. It was an old, I guess you'd call it a townhouse, or probably, when it was built, it was probably some sort of estate house. Anyway, it spanned the entire length for it facing the street, and below it were 2 apartments. You had apartment 1 over here, which was a 1-bedroom. You had apartment 2 over here, which was a studio, and above them both, in the hallway, was my 2-bedroom apartment. Well, like I said, physically I started to fall on hard times, so I went and moved in with somebody else. I left there trying to cut expenses so I didn't have to work my ass off so much. And years later I returned, and my partner and I lived in this 1-bedroom, and it was really tiny, obnoxiously so. I had also lived in the studio apartment previously. It was my first apartment. But anyway, when we lived there, when my partner was slogging it to work, and when I was driving, I think it was about an hour to work one way, there was a woman who moved in with her kid and her boyfriend, which beat her, as it turns out. And these people lived in the 2-bedroom apartment I once occupied, which, like I said, goes over the top of the 1-bedroom, the studio, and the hallway. Now, Alec and I, my partner and I, were living in the very tiny 1-bedroom, which we had to move out of because of mold eventually. And across the hall from us, living in the studio apartment, was a divorced civil servant. She worked for the local courthouse, and the woman who lived above us was able-bodied. I mean, she wasn't the brightest, but she was able-bodied, and she collected a check from the government. And she lived above all 3 of us. There's something to be said for that. Why is it 3 people who were working were forced to live in confined spaces, and frankly were less than desirable, yet somebody who wasn't working, who was able-bodied, was living much better than we were? I mean, our fridges weren't full. Case in point, that's a problem. I know another man who he's got 3 kids, and he's being kept by the government. I know from first-hand knowledge that this man is being kept by the government. But my mom, who is 57 and is making below poverty level money, owes the federal government $27 fucking dollars. Something wrong with that. This woman, her state of living improved when she got married to a nice man after her previous husband had passed away at age 50. And they own a nice trailer together, but they eke out an existence, and it's, after working your ass off all of your life, just seems like there should be more. I mean, isn't that what the American dream is? You work hard and you will get somewhere. Maybe it's just millennial cynicism, but bullshit. I've worked hard a lot, and it's to the point now where I am not physically capable. I still go to work. I still do my job. I'm very fortunate to have a job that is not physical. But there is no American dream. I live in the comfort I do because my partner and I both work full-time, and frankly, we rent a nice apartment that we couldn't afford without the landlord's generosity. because I know he could get more money for this apartment because of where it is. But he's nice enough to rent it to us at something we can afford. How does this tie in with the whole presidential election or the campaign season of 2016? Well, you have the whole quote-unquote Republican idea, the far-right wing with Senator Cruz and Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, a failed businessman, somebody who he's used the excesses of capitalism to get where he is, and it's not exactly the nicest thing in the world to do. He's undoubtedly screwed a lot of people to get to where he is, and again, maybe that's cynicism on my part, but I've worked jobs in Fortune 500 companies, and I know that you don't get ahead by being a nice guy and being the good guy, and I just can't believe Mr. Trump got to where he is without screwing quite a few people over. And his whole idea of this self-determination and fuck the immigrant, it just doesn't work. It's not real. It's classism. That's all it is. I mean, he doesn't know what it's like to live like we do, like the rest of us, like the working poor. And then you have Senator Sanders. We won't even talk about Secretary Clinton, the Democratic nominee presumptive. But let's talk about Senator Sanders. He is presenting a good idea. He is saying, I'm a socialist. I'm an avowed socialist. He didn't say, I'm a communist. For one thing, is bad juju associated with that word. But he wants socialism, where its primary economic idea is redistribution of wealth. And it sounds really good. I mean, it just does. To think that the wealth won't be locked up in the 1%. You know, it won't be tied up. Maybe people like me and maybe people like you, if you're watching this, can enjoy some better things in life. Maybe we might know what it is to live on an equal footing. My problem with the whole redistribution of wealth thing is the examples I've cited. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and like I said, I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for other people. But I treasure it because I've earned shit. I've gotten up every day. I live in chronic pain. I have back problems. I have fibromyalgia. I get up and I go to work through fatigue. I haven't had a vacation. It will have been 4 years this June. I have not had a paid week off. I haven't had a week off, period, in 4 years. So the thought of me supplying tax dollars to people like I've just referenced, I can't support that. I'm glad to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. I mean, I probably won't see Social Security, but I want the elderly and the infirm to have a safety net. I want them. We're morally obliged, you know, if nothing else, we are morally obliged to take care of our elderly, our infirm, and our most vulnerable citizens. I'm sorry, but this nation is too wealthy, and we do too well to not do that. I mean, the way we have veterans and mentally ill people, sometimes who are both, living in this country is a fucking disgrace. There's no question about that. But I'm not up for redistribution of wealth because I've seen it. I mean, we've had 3 petri dishes to observe, over the last 60 years. In the world, we have now debunked USSR, Cuba, and China. Unfortunately, the USSR and Cuba ended up as dictatorships, and China, at best, as an oligarchy. And the redistribution of wealth worked. Everybody's poor, save for the dictators and their class. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is there, but we think 1%'s bad here. It just doesn't work. Economically, morally, it works. Socially, I think it's got a damn good chance. But there are a lot of people who have worked from rags to riches. I mean, I wouldn't support Dr. Ben Carson if I was paid, but I read his autobiography years ago or not autobiography, but I read his biography years ago when I was a kid, and he is really a rags to riches success story. I have two friends, one of which is my landlord. You know, my friend came from, modest circumstances, and he has worked his ass off and gone to school and gone to school and gone to school, and he really made something of himself, and I'm impressed. I have another friend who did not. I mean, yeah, he was born into some circumstances that were economically good, but it was taken away from him. And he still went out there and he made something of himself. No education, no formal education in the way that we think about higher education, but he's one of the most successful people I know, and frankly, the man's a personal hero of mine, mentor, friend. That's what capitalism does, and of course capitalism has its successes. I mean, I'm reading Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Yeah, it's a fictional novel about 100 years ago. Well, yeah, 100 years ago. But that shit hadn't gone away today, not everywhere. And there are still some pretty poor people in the United States. Redistribution of wealth. For those of us who have worked, scratched, sacrificed, lived off of peanut butter and ramen noodles, the whole idea of that going away and us just giving money to people to make things equal when it's not. I mean, I can't dig that. I wish I could say we live in a meritocracy, but the truth is we don't. Because a man can work his ass off and still get nowhere. I've watched it happen to my parents. I've watched it happen to my grandparents, and my grandparents are some damn good people. All of them. And they've worked hard. My great-grandparents worked hard. And they don't have what they deserve. I'll put it to you that way. My mother's mother is one of the sweetest ladies in the world. Give you the shirt off her back, food out of her pantry when she doesn't have enough herself. Watched her do it. She doesn't live like she deserves to live. Thank God for Social Security. So she has a place. That works. But barely. It's not enough. I can't vote for the excesses of the left wing because I've seen too many people suffer. And I've seen the bullshit sales tactic of the quote-unquote American dream. It's not real. I can't vote for the excesses of the right. They don't know what it's like to scratch and to dig. They don't know what it's like to try to make the best you can out of the lot you got. So where the hell does that leave us? Right back to the place where I came when I started this. Powerlessness and futility. A 57-year-old woman who was in a great deal of pain who owes the fucking federal government $27 after working her ass off. That's where it leaves us. You all want a petty squabble about abortion settled 40 years ago. You all want a petty squabble about a fence. You don't get it. Might be wonderful talking points on the news. Might be a utopian vision to talk about socialism. But to the rest of us, what does it actually mean? Not a hell of a lot. Think about that when you're standing up for Mr. Trump or Mr. Saunders. Think about the real people and think about the people who get up and go to work in spite of it all. Happy Election Day. And I say this on the eve of tax day.